Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out for tonight's Federal Election Forum for the Chilliwack-Hope Riding, sponsored by the Chilliwack Arts and Cultural Centre Society. My name is Michael Cade, and I'm the Artistic and Managing Director for the Society. Out of respect for the candidates, I would ask that you turn off your cell phones. I'd also like to clearly state that we are not allowed to have audience members standing or sitting on the stairs. Please remain in your seat unless you are in line to use the microphone, which is over here. The moderator for tonight's forum is the Progress reporter Jennifer Feinberg. Jennifer is over here at the moderator's table, and I will be joining her to keep track of time. I'd like to go over the format of this evening's forum, but first there are a few issues of disclosure that need to be addressed. On August 24th, 2015, the Chilliwack Arts and Cultural Centre Society Board of Directors voted to host neutral forums for all municipal, provincial, and federal elections. None of the candidates are members of the Society's Board of Directors, nor are any of them current members of the Society. Admission for tonight's event is by donation. You will have noticed donation jars in the foyer. The donated funds will be directed to our Angel Fund, which makes children's arts and crafts classes at the Cultural Centre available to those young people in our community who would otherwise not be able to afford to attend. We do encourage you to be generous, and we have envelopes available for those of you who wish to receive a tax receipt for your contribution. You will notice that tonight's forum is being filmed for broadcast on YouTube. Please check the Cultural Centre's Facebook page for a link to the live stream if you wish to review tonight's forum. And now for the format for tonight. You will notice that the candidates have been arranged in alphabetical order. Each candidate will have 5 minutes at the podium to state his or her platform. Our timekeeper tonight is Sue Koopman from the Chilliwack Toastmasters Club. Sue? The club meets on Wednesdays at 7:30 at the Mount Sham Lions Club Hall beside Evergreen Hall. We encourage you to check out the great work that they do in helping people to become amazing public speakers. The club is having an open house on October 16th. You would be most welcome to come out and meet their members and see if joining their club is something that would be right for you. Now, Sue is sitting in the center of the front row and will be keeping track of time. The candidates will be notified of their remaining time by colored cards. Sue will raise the yellow card when the candidate has 10 seconds left and the red card when they are out of time. If the candidate continues to speak after the red card is raised, they will hear this sound. You don't want to hear that sound. If I ring the bell, we are turning off your microphone. So please don't be loud after that. Following the platform statements, we'll be alternating questions from the floor with submitted questions that you have provided in writing prior to our beginning and at the intermission, as well as questions submitted through Twitter using the hashtag ChilliwackVotes 2019. To ask a question from the floor, please approach the microphone located in the audience area, state your name, identify whom you are directing the question to, then state the question. Questions must be directed to one specific candidate. Please do not ask all the candidates to respond, and please keep questions clear and short. The moderator will not be allowing speeches. Questions are limited to 1 minute in length. Also, please speak loudly. Microphones only work if they have something to amplify. The candidates will answer the question using the microphone in front of them. Again, please speak loudly. While you're at the microphone, I will remind you that this is not a debate. Please do not challenge candidates because you do not like their answer. And I would ask that you not ask follow-up questions, as it is most likely that there will be substantially more questions than time. Once you've asked your question, please return to your seat. Our moderator will then move on to another question, direct the question to another candidate, or ask the candidate for clarification. Our moderator will be working hard to try to ensure that each of the 7 candidates, although by my count we only have 6 tonight, will have an equal opportunity to speak. And as such, may at times only accept questions that are to be directed to a candidate that has had less opportunity to speak than the others. Candidates may elect to speak to questions asked of a fellow candidate by raising their hand and surrendering one of their yellow cards. Candidates have been each given 5 yellow cards. When a candidate is out of yellow cards, they may not speak to a question unless it is specifically directed to them by the person who asked the question or by the moderator. Candidates' answers will be limited to 90 seconds. The first half will last 75 minutes, at which time we will have a 25-minute break. Candidates have the option of meeting with their campaign team on stage or joining you in the foyer, allowing you to ask questions one-on-one. Written questions will be accepted for the first 10 minutes of the intermission only, allowing our moderator 10 minutes to review the questions before we begin. The second half of the forum will last 60 minutes. The forum will end at 9:35 sharp. Candidates and audience members are reminded that tonight's forum is a civilized discussion. Everyone is asked to please conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Audience members are reminded that the candidates are undertaking a willingness to give of themselves to support our community, and as such, they deserve an opportunity to be heard without heckling or inappropriate comments and responses. Candidates are reminded that the audience members are here to have their questions answered directly by those who are running for office. Answers should be directly connected to the question asked and should always be given in a respectful manner. At no time is it appropriate for anyone here to raise their voice in anger or frustration, but only so that they can be clearly heard. Following the forum, you will have an opportunity to meet with the candidates in the foyer for more one-on-one questions. So hopefully this is all clear, and so now I would like to turn the evening over to our moderator, the progress reporter, Jennifer Feinstein. Thank you.
Hi, guys. So we will start with the 5-minute speeches. So first it's candidate Bogdanovic at the mic. Thanks so much. Oh, can you hear me? So I will speak directly into the mic and make sure that you can hear me. So we're starting the 5-minute portions. Each candidate will have 5 minutes at the mic, and starting with candidate Bogdanovic.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. The PPC wants Canadians to vote their values, and if you value freedom, free market, free enterprise, free trade with nations that we can trust, not China, then the fundamental freedoms enshrined in our charter, the PPC is the only party. We believe in free trade, and this includes trade across provincial borders and the building of infrastructure to help with that trade. A 2016 study published in the Canadian Journal of Economics concluded that interprovincial trade barriers cost Canadians roughly $100 billion in lost economic opportunities annually. That is equivalent to a staggering $7,500 per household every year. We need to get provinces to drop their provincial trade barriers. To create a competitive economy, we want to get rid of the capital gains, lower corporate tax rates, end corporate subsidies, and extend the accelerated capital cost allowance to all sectors of our economy. We want to reform equalization so that Quebec is not allowed to perpetually hog most of the equalization. Harper's tampering with the formula pushed Quebec's share from 50% to 70%. BC rarely gets any equalization. We support climate realism, not hysteria, because when does hysteria ever result in good policies? On immigration, the PPC believes that the current approach of bringing in 300,000, which is supported by all the other main parties, is too high and is costing Canada too much money. Grubel and Grady have calculated that the current approach is a $30 billion drain on government coffers. We need skilled workers, and to attract the right mix, we must make our immigration policies easier for those we invite in. They should be shown our full hospitality as they become full citizens, and we should make this process easier and faster for them. Reducing immigration to less than 150,000 will also help provinces to address the housing crisis. We cannot merely build our way out of this crisis, and the current approach is obviously flawed. Prices are driven by the law of supply and demand. We have to reduce demand in this country and empower provinces and municipalities to increase supply. Our immigration system is broken. It is failing Canada, and it is failing the newcomers who are coming to our shores. This is demonstrated by the fact that the number of homeless newcomers has doubled in 2 years, and newcomers now occupy 40% of the shelter spaces in Toronto. It is demonstrated by the fact that the housing crisis in Vancouver and Toronto escalated in harmony with higher rates of immigration. We should be emphasizing that in Canada we hold to certain shared values, such as equality of men and women, tolerance for diversity, including diversity of opinions, and respect for the rule of law. Regarding the very pressing issues of poverty and crime, the PPC will work to empower the RCMP to more effectively manage the situation, examining what changes in the law would be necessary to effect positive change. We will work to transfer tax points to the provinces and the municipal governments so that they have direct control of the funding needed to get proactive on these issues. Our communities need to have resources that are under their complete control. When they have control of a large share of our tax revenue, communities will be able to adapt and manage and innovate. All the other parties talk of spending more and more, but the PPC approach is to empower other jurisdictions to spend more wisely and efficiently. When they have more tax revenue under their direct control, they can reopen detox centers, expand programs like Cyrus Centre and Ruth and Naomi's, implement housing first policies. No solution to homelessness can work without the active support of community leaders, so let's give the communities the resources they need and get out of their way. Finally, we support our veterans because supporting veterans is a matter of honor. We will reinstate the fair disability pension that the Conservatives abolished in 2006. Ultimately, we want to fight for that vision expressed by John Diefenbaker many years ago. I am a Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, or free to choose those who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind. Thank you.
Hi there. Can we have Amber to the stage, please? Thanks very much for that, candidate. Good on it. And the next one is candidate Green to the microphone. Thanks so much. 5 minutes to introduce everything.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Bonsoir, mon amis. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Arthur Green, and I'm the Green Party of Canada candidate for Chilliwack-Hope. It's truly an honor to be able to represent the Greens for Chilliwack-Hope. I've taken on this challenge because of my deep concern for your children and your grandchildren and future generations. We are now in the midst of a climate crisis. Everything that we know, see, and breathe is at stake. Top climate scientists from 190 nations around the world, known as the International Panel for Climate Change, are warning us that we must stop emitting carbon emissions into the atmosphere or we face an apocalyptic disaster. The International Panel on Climate Change is telling us that if we fail at keeping our average global temperature from rising over 1.5 degrees centigrade from our baseline temperature at the start of the Industrial Revolution, we'll trigger tipping points and risk runaway global warming. We are already witnessing traumatic changes in our normal climate patterns, such as yearly record-breaking annual global temperatures, unprecedented forest fires in northern Alaska and in the Arctic. Even in British Columbia, where in the last 2 out of 3 years, We have had forest fires so bad that the smoke has turned our days into nights. We are losing our glaciers at an unprecedented rate. The Arctic polar cap is shrinking considerably every year, creating havoc for our polar bears in their loss of habitat. Our seas are acidifying, causing extinctions of our sea star populations. In fact, if we continue on our current path, scientists are warning us we may lose 1 million species by the end of this century, including our own. That's the bad news. The good news is we still have hope, but it's not going to be easy. But if we begin to act now, it is achievable. If we can reduce our man-made carbon emissions to 0 by 2050, we have a chance at saving ourselves. The Green Party has developed a plan aptly named Mission Possible. Mission Possible is a 20-point roadmap in how we, working together and with the rest of the world, have a path at saving ourselves. The first thing we must do is declare a climate emergency and establish an intercabinet of all parties to combat the gravest security threat the world has ever seen. We need to set stringent targets of 60% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 and 0 emissions by 2050. We need to respect the evidence of researchers and universities and assume leadership to carry it out. We need to ban fracking and maintain carbon pricing to reduce major sources of greenhouse gases. We need to create an east-west electrical grid and remove fossil fuel generation from it. We need to electrify our transportation system by 2040 and create a cross-country electrical vehicle charging system. We need to retrofit all our buildings to recapture the 30% of all the energy that's lost to leakage. We need to stop importing foreign oil and use only Canadian product, upgrade our refining process here in Canada, and value add our own industry. We need to mandate to switch to biodiesel for agriculture, fishing, and forestry equipment. We need to transition our current energy employees to manage the renewable energy generation projects. We'll need all governments and community organizations to step up and plant trees, install solar panels, heat pumps to maximize energy efficiency. We'll need to review all infrastructure investments to adapt to climate change and adjust land use accordingly. We need to cancel the purchase of F-35 fighter bombers and invest this money in protection, such as water bombers and pre-mitigation for natural disasters. Though this is a complex plan, it is one that can be achieved through determination of population. We can, for once again, become leaders on the world stage, not only at mitigating climate change, but leading by example to create a safe and equitable society. We can transfer workers with skills to well-paid jobs in the new green economy. In fact, the transformation to clean and renewable energy systems will be the greatest economic catalyst the world will ever see.
Thank you so much, Candidate Green. Next up is Candidate McQuillan. Candidate Heather McQuillan for the NDP.
Thank you all for coming today. They're going to make me stand in one place at this podium, and anyone who knows me knows I am not very good at standing in one place when I'm talking. I didn't anticipate running. It's not something I graduated high school and hoped to do. I'm here as a wife and a mother and a workers' advocate and a caregiver for my mother who has Parkinson's. I'm a technician in the film industry, and I have been an advocate for workers' rights and family rights almost since the day I started. I'm a union member, and I've seen the difference that having a larger body that fights for the people can do in terms of benefits and lifestyle and real livability. I've watched governments who fight for corporations and offer subsidies and who delay the reality of dealing with something like a climate emergency. And that's concerning for me. When my husband and I looked at having a family, we saw how hard it was going to be to balance everything. We saw how corporations have made it virtually impossible to live off wages and how the cost of living was really difficult. So we started a nonprofit that advocates for families in our industry. And when we started it, I thought I would get 5 moms who wanted to share a nanny. The reality is I got hundreds and hundreds of emails. And those emails have not just been from our industry, they've expanded over and across all kinds of industries. And that's a concern. I've seen the difficulties that seniors face and people with disabilities face, and the lack of accessibility. My mom has Parkinson's. We're the primary caregivers for her. And I know how difficult it is for my husband and I to navigate that world. And we're great with technology. I can't imagine what it would be like to feel ill and not have someone else who can stand up for you. The NDP wants to stand up for Canadians. They're tired of giving subsidies to the richest. They're tired of giving subsidies to corporations that do the planet harm. We have a climate crisis. And whether we want to acknowledge that or not, we're spinning out of control. It's putting everything we value at risk. And if we don't take that seriously and transition to green energy, we're going to have a big problem, not only for our generation, but for generations to come. I want to make sure that my son doesn't grow up with an environmental disaster. I want to give him better than that. We know that it's going to take a lot to support Canadians as we make this transition. And our platform doesn't only accommodate for the transition, but we anticipate that families are going to need a little bit of help. We know that. We're going to invest in green energy jobs and retraining. We're going to make sure that people have the support systems to deal with that transition. We want people to know that they can support their families. I'm here as a mother and a wife and an advocate. I don't like being front and center, but it's imperative that we start looking at what has been and standing up for what we need and what's good for Canadians, not just settling for what's worse. There are other options than what we've had. I want everybody to stand up and have courage to vote for something that is good for Canadians, good for families, good for workers, good for seniors. It can be better than what's going to leave this country at its worst. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was candidate McQuillan. Next up is candidate O'Donnell, Dorothy Jean O'Donnell. She's going to take the podium for 5 minutes, explain what she's doing here.
I'm proud to represent the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada, which is running 50 candidates in this election, half men and half women. We stand for an anti-war government, for democratic renewal, and for a change in the direction of the economy. First of all, on the question of an anti-war government, Canada is the second largest exporter of armaments to West Asia, with a $15 billion contract for light armored vehicles with Saudi Arabia. The largest sales of Canadian armaments is to the US, and Canada is involved in sales to 11 countries involved in aggressive wars and human rights abuses. The US is currently involved in wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Nigeria, and West Africa. And Canada is not only facilitating, but profiting off of those aggressive wars. We say that Canada should be a factor for peace in the world, should withdraw from NATO and NORAD, and take a courageous stand against the U.S. Aggressive policies towards Venezuela, in the Ukraine, and elsewhere. We also stand for a change in the direction of the economy, for public right, not private monopoly right. We say that investments should be made in social programs, and the direction of the economy should be to enhance the well-being of the people, not for the profit of multinational corporations. And finally, and most importantly, we stand for democratic renewal. The cartel party system represented on this stage by the two candidates to your right has dominated Canadian political life for more than a century. And it means that a tiny handful of people make the decisions and determine the future of your life. We say that Canadians need to empower themselves, make the decisions for themselves, organize amongst their peers to defend the principles and the stands that are important to them, and move forward on that basis. Various false dichotomies get put before you, which many may find confusing. Immigration at 350,000, immigration at 150,000. That's not a difference in principle. And cast in those terms, it's really beyond your powers to analyze and take decisions about it. We say that, as on many different issues, immigration should be something that people in their communities should decide upon. That is, what level of immigrants do we want to have in Chilliwack in the next year? We say such and such a figure as a target. We review it in a year or so, see how that goes. You're actually involved in the decision. And if you have such a discussion, no doubt somebody will raise the fact that the education of our youth, the training and skills that are needed to meet the jobs, those investments should be made. Coming in here, I saw a program from the Liberal candidate, which is celebrating that 85 long-term boil water advisories have been lifted on Indigenous communities since 2015. I can tell you, I recall vividly at the age of 8 being shocked to see on the CBC that there was water contamination on native reserves in Canada. That's 60 years ago. A couple of years after that, shocked to hear about Miramata disease, which is still...
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. It's hard to fit it all into 5 minutes sometimes, you know. It's a lot to say. Next up, of course, candidate Straw to the microphone for 5-minute intro. And one more, and then we'll turn to some of the questions we've been receiving. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mark Strahl. I was born and raised right here in Chilliwack. I've been married to my wife Lisa for 20 years, and our son turned 15 just last week. We love living, working, and raising our family in this remarkable city. I'm an honorary member of the Rotary Club of Chilliwack and a member of the Royal Canadian Legion Vetter Branch 280, the Hope and District Chamber of Commerce, the Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce, the Chilliwack Healthier Community Group, and the Chilliwack Housing First Task Team. I volunteer with the Chilliwack Bowls of Hope and try to serve our community wherever I can. As a member of the official opposition Conservatives, I've helped to hold Justin Trudeau to account for the last 4 years. Now Canadians can hold them accountable as well. More and more Canadians feel like they're either falling behind or barely getting by under this Liberal government. That's simply not good enough. Only Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party have the team and the plan that can help put Canada back on track. We proposed a universal tax cut, which would put $850 back into the pockets of a Canadian couple every year. We promised to remove the GST from home heating bills, because heating your home in the winter is not a luxury and it shouldn't be taxed as such. We've committed to increasing the age credit by $1,000, which could save a senior couple up to $300 per year. And we're promising to restore fiscal sanity to Ottawa after 4 years of out-of-control deficit spending by Justin Trudeau. We want to reduce foreign aid by 25%, cutting $1.5 billion to middle and upper-class countries, because that money should be spent where it's needed most, which is right here in Canada. We'll also cut corporate welfare, because profitable companies like Bombardier, the Irving family, and Real Canadian Superstore don't need billions of dollars from Canadian taxpayers. We've committed to reversing Justin Trudeau's tax changes on small businesses, because we should be supporting, not undermining, the backbone of our local and national economies. Andrew Scheer's also proposed a real plan for the environment, a plan that's focused on green technology, not tax hikes, on protecting our natural environment, our air, land, and water by taking practical, meaningful action, on banning the dumping of raw sewage into our oceans, rivers, and lakes, for example. We will also export our environmental excellence to take the fight against climate change global in countries like India and China. It's been an honor to serve the people of Chilliwack-Hope. I've made it a priority to meet with you and provide unprecedented opportunities for you to let me know what your priorities are. I've held dozens of Coffee Connections meetings where you control the agenda and provide me feedback that I can take back to Ottawa. I've created a youth advisory board, which has provided opportunities for dozens of young future leaders to discuss politics and policies with their Member of Parliament. I've developed and maintained productive working relationships with local leaders in government, business, and civil society, relationships that have helped to get big things done, like securing funding for the new Vetter Bridge, for example. Now, I've heard some of my opponents criticize people who serve the public full-time, and that's regrettable and hypocritical. Every single one of us on this stage is offering ourselves to serve you, and whichever one of us is successful on October 21st will serve you as a full-time Member of Parliament. It's a job that I've been honored to have been given by the people of Chilliwack-Hope, no one else, on 2 occasions, and I'm asking you to continue to put your trust in me as I represent you to the best of my abilities, both here at home and back in Ottawa. Because the stakes are high in this election. After 4 years, Justin Trudeau has shown that he cannot be trusted. He broke his promises on balancing the budget, on reforming the electoral system, and on running an ethical and transparent government, to name just a few. He has been found guilty of breaking ethics laws on multiple occasions, the latest being his SNC-Lavalin scandal. He has embarrassed Canada with his antics at home and his weak leadership on the world stage. Simply put, he doesn't deserve another term as Prime Minister. On October 21st, I'm asking you to vote to elect a new Conservative government, a government that will clean up Ottawa, live within its means, lower your taxes, and leave more money in your pocket, because it's time for you to get ahead. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Candidate Strahl. Next up is Candidate Valonis. And can we ask people who have questions that they want to ask at the mic to start moving toward the mic? They can sit near it, stand in front of it. Thanks very much. Candidate Valonis, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory for the Stolo Nation. And I would just like to thank all of you for coming tonight. I know it's not always easy to come out, especially when it's a little bit cold out, so thank you all for being here, and thank you to the candidates. My name is Kelly Valonis, and I have lived in Chilliwack for the past 43 years. I grew up here, I raised my family here, I went to school here, and I've worked and I've played here. I am very proud of the role that I have right now as the Executive Director for the Chilliwack and District Seniors Resource Society. It's a role that I take great pleasure in every day, being able to advocate and work with seniors to access the programs and services they need. But it's also a role that sometimes brings me sadness because I see how many programs and services that aren't there. And that's one of the reasons I decided to step up and run, because we need to make sure that we're serving the people in our community and the people in this country that need it the most. Prior to working there, I worked for the Greater Vancouver YMCA as program manager for programs for at-risk youth. And I was able to bring programs to Chilliwack, to Abbotsford, Surrey, and Coquitlam that supported youth when they were in crisis and gave them opportunities to be successful and move forward in their life. Chilliwack is my home. This community really matters to me. I have spent so much time in here. I am a Rotary member. I am a member of the Imagination Library. I'm also a member of the Chilliwack Healthy Communities. And this is one of the reasons I decided that I wanted to step up and run for the Liberal Party, because working in the trenches day to day, seeing what the community needs, made me realize that it's time that we have somebody that's willing to be the voice for the people in Chilliwack and Hope. Not Ottawa's voice to you, but somebody who's willing to sit down, work with all levels of government, all levels of business, every constituent, and find out what the real issues are that people are facing. Over the past few weeks, we've been going door to door and talking to people, and it's very interesting. I find that at some doors, people will say, oh, no, I'm voting for a different party. And I said, well, I still want to know what your concerns are, because when I represent you, I'm representing everybody, not just the people that vote for me. The reason I decided to run for the Liberal Party is because I actually think the past 4 years we've done pretty darn good. We've actually reached over 90% of our promises. The Liberal team are the only party with a positive plan to strengthen our middle class and to grow our economy and offer real help to real families. We're not offering to put $850 back in your pocket, because we know by lowering taxes to that point, we're taking away from programs and services that we need to reinvest in everybody and reinvest in our own community. We have a real plan for our climate crisis, because our climate is in crisis, and anybody that could stand up here and say different needs to look at the science. We have a plan that will move forward for zero emissions in 2050 as well. We have the lowest unemployment rate in history, and we've created 1 million new jobs. Yet the sad fact is, poverty is still such a key issue, and poverty amongst our most vulnerable, our youth and our seniors. Another reason why I need to run in this election, to make sure that those vulnerable sectors are being taken care of. We have lowered taxes for 9 million Canadians and introduced the child tax benefit that's actually lifted 300,000 children out of poverty. I've had some conversations with families in Chilliwack, and I've asked them, has this made a difference for you? And some of the families have said to me, it's a difference between being able to afford school supplies or paying my hydro bill. Now, that's not a choice any family member should ever have to make. And so we're investing 15% more for children under 1, because we know we need to keep that money in the people that need it the most upfront. We did reduce the small business tax from 11% to 9%. And we need to keep working with our small businesses, because we know, especially in Chilliwack, small business is our economy, and it's the heartbeat of our community. And we will remove the credit card swipe fees, as we know those are detrimental in making ends meet each month. We reopened the Kitsilano Coast Guard base that was closed under the Harper years. Since reopening that, we have had over 150 environmental calls. So you could imagine if we hadn't reopened that, and bringing jobs and economy back. We've increased our investments in Indigenous people by 50%, and it's not enough. And I agree. We should not be celebrating the fact that we've had 85 water. What we should be, we never should have had to have that, but we have to keep moving forward on that, because all Canadians deserve clean drinking water. And I think it's time that we have an inclusive leader in Chilliwack, one who accepts and promotes everyone, no matter what your sexuality is, no matter what your race is, no matter what your religion is, everybody. Oh, I've got the red card. Thank you. I don't want the bell.
Much. So we've come to the end of the 5-minute introductions, and thank you very much for listening to it. And thank you all very much for being here. I'd like you all to give yourself a little hand just for showing up. It's, you know, being involved politically is a very worthy endeavor. So I thank you very much, one and all, for being here. We're going to move on to the microphone. We're going to take the first question. Keep in mind that we're not looking for short questions and no preambles and no speeches. Go ahead. Yes? And always give your name, please, before you're going to ask your question, and who the specific candidate that it's directed to. And please do not ask all candidates to answer. That's not the way we'll work it. You'll direct your question to one, and possibly another may answer. So please go ahead, announce your name and the candidate.
My name is Bryden Nelms. Question is for Mark Strahl. This past April, the Liberal government announced $45 million worth of funding for flood protection upgrades, specifically 6 kilometers of dike west of Young Road. My question, if the Conservatives form government, will you honor that commitment, yes or no?
Oh, is Mike on? Is Mike?
Mike?
Oh, it's on. I think it's
Okay.
on.
The answer is yes. Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives have been clear that for all infrastructure commitments that were made prior to the call of the election, we will honor those.
Thanks very much.
Hall?
Oh, sorry. Next question is, we have, this is from the submitted questions, and we will come back to the mic in a minute. So if you can just sit down, this question is for candidate McQuillan, candidate Heather McQuillan. What does your party do to address women's issues?
I'm going to have to pull this up. You know, this is a bit of an interesting question for me. I think you can really see within our candidates, women are really represented. Even myself, I know there's a little bit of a question if I'm old enough to run. I'm 35, I'm old enough to vote, I am old enough to run. But they want women to have their own voice. And you can see that we're represented in our candidates. We're represented in the MPs that have been selected and have been voted in. And you'll see that across the board. Our leader just stated that men should not be discussing women's rights without women there. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ken. The question from the mic, next up. Gentleman had a question. Your name, please, and the
Yes.
candidate you're directing it to.
My name is Mark Hall, and my question is directed to candidate Robert Boganovic. Rob, in other forums you've stated that you are pro-life. There are several other candidates that also state they are pro-life, but generally the attitude is they're pro-life but will not reopen the debate. I want to hear your point of view and your contrast there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that if you take a look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it starts off with the statement that we all are entitled to life, liberty, and security of the person. And the ruling that happened back in 1989, the Morgenthaler ruling, it basically ignored the life part of that. I think that we need to have a law. I think that we need to have a vigorous debate in this country about where that law ought to be designed. I'm pro-life. I would, really like a strong law on that, probably one of the tougher ones in the Western world, but right now we have no law, and we're the only nation in the Western world that doesn't have a law governing abortion. I think that a lot of individuals can say that they are pro-life, but if you really do believe in the cause, you ought to be willing to stand up for those who have no voice. And I think that you take a look at every other major party, they have said, no, they're not going to do anything to take on abortion on demand in this country. We believe that we should have a restriction at the very least 24 weeks, that's into the 3rd trimester, unless it is a mother's life is being in jeopardy, you should not be allowed to terminate a pregnancy.
Thank you very much. Oh, we have a yellow card over there, please. That yellow cards are the only opportunity for rebuttal, and that's from candidate Oh, sorry, Valonis on the end there. Go ahead.
Thank you. I absolutely disagree with everything that was just said. This is my body, and it is my choice, not a government's choice, not a man's choice, to tell me what I can and cannot do with it. The Liberal Party supports women's rights and women's rights to choose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move on. It's a question for candidate Strahl. Thank you so much. Candidate Strahl, what is your plan to address the illegal border crossers issue?
Well, thank you very much. That certainly has been a big issue in Parliament for the last number of years. I think, quite frankly, this Liberal government has completely mismanaged our immigration system and has in fact undermined the Canadian consensus on immigration. Our leader, Andrew Scheer, today announced that a Conservative government would, first of all, hire an additional 250 Canada Border Service agents to try to address this issue. He would renegotiate the Safe Third Party Agreement with the United States, which allows illegal immigrants to come across at unrecognized border crossings and circumvent that Safe Third Country Agreement. And we also talked about moving IRB, Immigration and Refugee Board judges, to those sites where that illegal activity is happening so that those individuals that are crossing illegally can be processed quickly and efficiently, because quite frankly, Canadians support an immigration system that is orderly and fair and compassionate. And right now, under this Liberal government, that has not been happening. We've allowed 40,000 people to cross at unregistered border crossings, and that needs to stop now.
Thank you so much, candidate Strahl. Next up at the mic, who's up next? Thank you. Come forward.
My name is Sabella Larson. I am 11 years old, and my question is for Mark Strahl. What do you have to say about the derogatory comments that Andrew Scheer has said about LGBTQ plus people?
Go ahead. Candidate Strahl, please.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that Mr. Scheer has not made derogatory comments. He has repeatedly indicated that he believes in the equality of all Canadians, and that's what a Conservative government will stand up for. We have a proud record of standing up for equality rights right across the country and around the world. Actually, the Conservative government was the government that brought in the Rainbow Refugee Program, solidified it and invested in it to protect LGBTQ refugees from around the world who were in danger not only of who were in danger of losing their lives, quite frankly, in some of the places where they had indicated that they were LGBTQ. So our government, a Conservative government, will commit to equality for all Canadians, no matter their sexual orientation, and we've done that in the past, and both at home and abroad.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Next up is a question for candidate Green, and it has to do with climate change. And there's a bit of a preamble, but we will address the other part of the question. Maxime Bernier and the PPC seem to be open to present the full discussion on the climate change topic. Could we get a leader or even an MP that is willing to present all sides of the climate crisis story so the public can be well informed when they make their choices?
So what's the question?
That's the question. Would you be a leader, or would you be a leader or an MP who's willing to present all sides of the climate crisis question?
Well, I believe that I do listen to all sides. In the Green Party, we make our policy based on science-based evidence. My colleague to the right of me, he is diametrically opposed to all my positions on climate change, but I definitely listen to his opinions, and I take his ideas into consideration. But like I stated, our policy is based on science-based evidence, and that's how we make our decisions.
Thank you very much. Is there a question at the mic?
My name is Adam, and my question is for Kelly. Why, with all the talk about climate change and the carbon tax, is the Liberal government refunding 90% of the carbon taxes collected back to the people, and the remaining 10% going to capital projects to offset their carbon costs? Why is 100% of carbon taxes not going to green projects when the Liberal Party and other parties are saying climate change is such a crucial issue?
Can you just repeat that last part of your question? I'm sorry, you were just a little bit close to the microphone. I had a hard time hearing you.
So why is 100% of carbon taxes not going to green projects when the Liberal Party and other parties are saying climate change is such a crucial issue?
Okay, thank you for the question, Adam. I believe that, as in anything, we have to make sure that we're putting the money back into investing into moving forward, which the Liberal Party is doing. So we're putting all the money back into green energy in some form or another. So the money that we are collecting from the tax is being reinvested, and some of that will be seen in the 50% tax cut that we are offering new tech clean businesses moving forward. It's going into working towards no fossil fuel, getting rid of coal. It's going towards the money that we put into our ocean protection plan. We now, when we came into power, there was 1% of our oceans protected. Now we're up over 15%. It's going back into protecting our environment, protecting our wildlife. So all the money that is coming in is being reinvested. It's just not being reinvested in exactly the place where you might think it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have a yellow card from candidate Bogdanovic. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Liberal plan on climate change is not a real plan. I think that they seem to think that they can solve this issue with taxes, and I don't think that is actually realistic. I think we need to be aware that Canada is only a very small portion of the carbon dioxide emissions on this planet, 1.4%. I also think that it's hypocritical that we have Justin Trudeau, who burns in 2 days more carbon than the average Canadian, and flies around with 2 jets during this campaign and authorized $18 million to build a private airport for a private golf course. I think it's hypocritical for him to constantly be going out and lecturing on the issue of climate change.
Thank you so much. The second yellow card is from candidate Green. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to correct Kelly on their policy. They actually reimburse all that climate, or all that carbon tax money gets reimbursed back to the constituents. So it's not reinvested into clean energy and the different types of projects that she was talking about. I think she was maybe a little bit confused on their policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is a question for candidate O'Donnell. Do you support community passenger rail services for the Fraser Valley?
Passenger rail?
Yes. Passenger rail services for the Fraser Valley South Side.
I certainly do, and there are various committees that have been working on this issue over the last 10 and more years, and that's a very good example of the need for empowerment, and that people are taking action into their own hands to build the society that they want to have. There was passenger rail in the interurban between Vancouver and Chilliwack at the early part of the century, and it's been set aside and mothballed, but the infrastructure is still there, and with relatively small amount of investment, it can be developed both as a commuter rail service and also in some aspect as a tourist and historical adventure sort of tour type of rail. I think they're doing that in the Langley area. So it's a very good example of the kind of initiative that is required to address the problems we're facing.
Thank you very much. Next up at the mic, do we have a question?
Yes, hi, my name is Tony, and in recent days there's been massive worldwide demonstrations inspired by Greta Thunberg, and we had 2 of them here in Chilliwack, a global climate strike.
State your
So
candidate.
my question, sorry?
For who?
So my question is for Mr. Mark Stroll. If you believe that we're undergoing a climate emergency, for which you have a plan, why didn't you or Mr. Harper, sorry, or your party, anybody party, demonstrate or showed up to any of these climate strikes, if you believe that, truly believe that it's an emergency?
Go ahead, candidate Strahl.
Yeah, I think that, quite frankly, our plan is a real plan that provides for real action, and simply, that is what we are focused on, is the plan that takes real action to protect our air, land, and water, and takes action to take the fight global. And I do think it's, as has been mentioned here, it's one thing to show up at a climate rally if you believe that, as I see you wearing a Liberal button, so as the leader Justin Trudeau did, he went and marched. He also bought a pipeline. He also is flying around the country with 2 airplanes, old inefficient airplanes, while lecturing Canadians about how they should pay more for gas and shouldn't drive so much to school and to work. So quite frankly, that kind of hypocrisy, I think Canadians are tired of it. They want to see a real plan. That's what our plan takes, real, tangible action. We're not going to parades. We're not lecturing other people. We have a plan that will actually make a real difference.
Thank you very much. Oh, there's a yellow card from Valonis. Candidate Valonis with a yellow card wants to get in on this topic. Please go ahead.
I find that very interesting because I was actually called a hypocrite in a letter to the editor in the Progress last week, because somebody said, why would the Liberal candidates show up at both the climate strikes when they don't have a real plan to change the climate? Well, I differ with you, Mark, because we do have a real plan, and me showing up at that climate strike was me showing up to support the people in this community that I want to represent, and to be there with them, thank you, to recognize that we are in climate crisis and that we have to make real change. And why would I not stand in support of the brave young people that came forward with passion and a real plan to implement, to make change? Because for me, sometimes it's not always about the party, it's about how you invest in your community and make them feel you're representing them and supporting them.
Thank you very much. Candidate Valonis. Next up with the yellow card is candidate Green. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to remind Kelly again that she actually stated at that climate rally that the Green Party has actually the best climate action plan of all political parties in Canada, and that her Prime Minister, her boss, bought a pipeline for $4 billion, $2 billion over the value of what the actual pipeline is worth. It's going to cost us another $11 billion to build a new existing pipeline for what we don't even have markets for. The pipeline is going to be built for the exportation of diluted bitumen, which is a climate catastrophe in itself. So I just wanted to remind my colleague of those facts. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next up is a question that came in earlier, and it's for candidate McQuillan. Do you plan to move to Chilliwack-Hope if you are successful?
Yes, actually. Yes,
There we
is
go.
the long and the short of it. Just to be clear, though, your MPs spend about 3 weeks a month in Ottawa and are back in the community for a week a month. Mark, I'm not too sure how often you manage to get back here. I'm sure it's about the same. But yes, is the long and the short of it.
Thank you very much, candidate McQuillan. Next up at the mic, do we have somebody?
Actually, can I add to that?
Go ahead.
We actually have already looked at a land here. So both my husband and I work a lot in the community. You probably don't see us because we're buzzing around, but we've been here quite a bit, and we've been looking even before we were running. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And next up at the mic.
Yes. Hi, my name is Bill. This question is directed to Kelly, but maybe the NDP and the Conservatives could comment on this too.
Okay, that's not how it works. You direct your question,
Okay.
and if they raise the yellow card, then they will jump in.
Okay,
So,
all right, sorry.
directed to.
Not too sure how to ask this question. For many, many, many years, Canada is divided from the east to the west with the money. When there's an election, all of a sudden we start pumping money out. I'd like to know, when are we going to stop this? What's going on? Like in Quebec, their houses washed away. They had already pumped out checks. Here in Grand Forks, you know, it's been over a year. Those people still haven't seen any money. Brian Jean of the Wild Rose Party found out that I don't know what the statistics are, but there's a lot of money that the Liberal government has been holding back from the West. When are we going to open up the West, and when are we going to be in business?
So what exactly is your question? You want to know when we're going to bring money back into the West from?
Sitting in Quebec, in Ontario, and in the East, there's nothing here, equalization.
So you believe that there has been no investments in the West?
Well, not as much as back East.
Okay.
Brian Jean, he released that of the Wild Rose Party. I'm sure you know about that.
I see the investments that have come out west through the National Housing Strategy. I've seen that the investments that come actually into this community with Ruth and Naomi's, with the 27 unit for low-income mothers, with the housing unit for affordable housing on Webb Avenue. That's a 67-unit building that was federal dollars came into that, which also created jobs and supported small business. I see money that comes into the West through the infrastructure programs that we have put in BC in the past 5 years. So, yeah, I guess that would be my answer on that. I'm not sure that it's going to be always equal because the population is different from the West to the East. But I absolutely see federal dollars coming into BC and Alberta.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a question from Twitter, and people are asking some questions at the hashtag Chilliwack Votes 2019. So the question is, sorry, we have a yellow card from candidate Bogdanovic. Before we get to that, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think the question you asked is a very good one. Right now, we do have an awful lot of money that leaves the West and heads out to the East, and Quebec is a big receiver of equalization. We are the party that wants to rework the formula. After the last time it was reworked under Harper, Quebec got a larger share, not a smaller share, of equalization. It went from 50 to now it's 70%. And if you take a look at all of Western Canada, this year only one province got any money, and it was Manitoba, and that's usually how it is. We are not being well served by this, which is why we need to orientate the way we do taxes so that the provinces are in better control of the tax revenue that they raise, shrink down the federal government so they can't dole it out to winners and losers. A real good example was last summer in 2018. Trudeau ran all over Canada, just making announcement after announcement after announcement, over $4.6 billion in announcements in one summer, and most of it seemed to be mysteriously targeting places like Quebec and Atlantic Canada. And I think we need to stop this pork barrel politics.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to take that question from Twitter. Now I'm going to go ahead and take that question from Twitter for candidate Straw. And the question is, under Harper, funding was cut for science and research, and scientists were muzzled. What is your party's plan for basic science?
Well, our party has followed and will continue to follow evidence-based decision-making. And quite frankly, that is a false statement, that in the year leading up to the last federal election, scientists gave 1,500 interviews. The policy was, quite frankly, the policy on scientists was continued by Justin Trudeau, as was evidenced by statements by the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. It says that the Trudeau government is continuing a Harper government communication policy that prevents scientists from participating in conferences. So interviews were given to many publications, 1,500 interviews in the last year. Nothing changed under Stephen Harper, or under Justin Trudeau. And quite frankly, if we want to talk about muzzling people, I think Canadians are much more interested in Justin Trudeau muzzling Jody Wilson-Raybould in the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go ahead and redirect that same question to candidate McQuillan, and it's, what is your party's plan for basic science?
So our party definitely does respect the science behind decisions. You can definitely see that in the seriousness we take the climate crisis. Our party leader, Jagmeet Singh, was the person who brought that motion to the floor to declare a climate crisis. So we intend to continue that same respect for scientists and including them in the conversation.
Thanks so much. Oh, yellow card from candidate Green. Go ahead, please. On the science question.
Yes, I'd just like to correct my colleague Heather, that it actually was Elizabeth May that raised the alarm about the impending climate crisis that's happening today. Jagmeet Singh likes to, once things don't start working for him properly and they see what success we had in Nanaimo with the by-election of Paul Manley, then he jumped on the bandwagon for the climate crisis. And so it was actually Elizabeth May who sparked the initial warning. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Up at the mic next. Who's got a question? Your name and who the candidate's directed to, please.
Okay. My name is Cecilia Forsbauer, and I have a question for Robert Bogdanovic. My question is, with your current stance on abortion, as a teacher, answer as a teacher, I guess, my sex education when I was in middle school was very, very poor. My mom had to email my PE teacher twice in order to convince him to bring a nurse in for our required sex education. I personally don't think that it is a safe opinion to have.
And the question for the candidate. Go ahead.
My question is, as a teacher, would it be in your best interest to put sex education before abortion laws, before you put up abortion laws, stronger abortion laws? As a teacher, would it be in your best interest to change the sex ed?
You mean as an MP?
Here? Sorry?
You mean as a federal MP?
Yeah, but also as a teacher, as a federal MP, would you change the state of our sex education here before you change abortion laws?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that the education system is run by the provinces, but I am all in favor of making sure that we have the maximum amount of information on issues like this. In fact, I'm always in favor of having vigorous discussion and debate on these issues, because it's out of the vigorous discussion and debate that you can begin to figure out where your values lie. You can begin to figure out all the ins and outs of this issue. Regarding the concerns about, maybe young people not being properly informed, I do believe that sex education probably has to start around I guess, age 12, because that is when a lot of young people are starting to get sexually active. But we're not passing a law that's going to, do much more than, say, third trimester abortions are going to be banned. I mean, we want to start that conversation, and we want it to be a very vigorous conversation, but we're not moving right now to ban abortion outright in Canada, because we don't believe that most Canadians are there on that issue. In fact, we think that we have to do a lot more of informing, because most Canadians, about 77%, do not realize we do not have a law on abortion.
Thanks very much. Candidate Bogdanovic. The next question is for candidate O'Donnell, and it has to do with 2011, Canada participated in the enforcement of the no-fly zone in Libyan airspace. And the question is, please explain how your foreign policy would include voters in decisions to use military force, including peacekeeping.
We are opposed to the use of military force to solve disputes. Disputes between people or disputes between nations should be resolved through dialogue, through the principles of the United Nations, and through the people themselves. Canada is playing a dismal role right now in supporting aggression against the Bolivarian Republic in Venezuela, where the government of Venezuela, which has been elected, has been undermined by some man in the street who declares himself to be so-called interim president, and with the massive support of the United States. So we're against these no-fly zones. They are a pretext for war, and we are in favor of making Canada a factor for peace.
Thank you so much, Candidate O'Donnell, on that question. No yellow cards, so we'll move to the mic. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Jack Kopstein, and I just want to, if you don't mind, I'd just like to correct a couple of things that were said because they were totally untrue.
Your question is for who?
My question is for Mr. Strahl, and that is, I'm a veteran of 35 years in the military, and this has been in the last 4 years. Thank you. Over the last 4 years, I've received several benefits on behalf of the veterans. I did not get those benefits when the Conservative Party were in power over 8 years. I am now telling you, and that's why I'm standing here with this thing on, because I have only one party to trust to look after the volunteer people in the forces, and that's the Liberal Party.
And your question for the candidate.
Are we going to get any kind of improvement with the Conservative government for the military?
Candidate Straw.
Yeah, I think I would challenge, I thank you for your service, first of all. I would dispute the statement that nothing happened under the Conservative government. And I would, quite frankly, add to the list of broken promises Justin Trudeau's promise in the last election that veterans would not have to fight in court for rights that for the benefits that they deserved. He also then spent in the last 4 years taking them to court, the Equitas veterans. In Edmonton, at one of his town halls, he told the veteran who had lost 1.5 legs that veterans were asking him for more than he could give right now. Quite frankly, that was unacceptable. We have said that we would invest, or that we would pass legislation that would see the social covenant between the government and its veterans recognized. We would make significant changes to the Liberal system to ensure that the most injured veterans receive the benefits that they were entitled to. So, quite frankly, I think that all parties want to do well by our veterans, but the Prime Minister made promises in the last election, including on the pension for life, that he's failed to deliver on.
Thank you so much, Candidate Strahl. We have a yellow card from Candidate Bogdanovic. Go ahead.
Yeah, also thank you for your service. I just want to say that I think both the Conservatives and the Liberals have been atrocious on the issue of the treatment of veterans. They basically, decided to save money at the expense of the individuals who have served our country best. And when we had our conference, in the PPC conference at Gatineau, we made the veterans front and center, unveiling our platform, which is to restore the disability protection rights that they had going back to 2006, and basically providing retroactively any missed payments that they would have had, because the truth is our veterans deserved it. Our platform was designed by veterans, presented by veterans, because in our party we support veterans, and we have put that front and center in our campaign.
Thank you so much. And that concludes the first portion of our questions, we're going to be moving into the intermission. I just want to encourage people, if they haven't heard a topic or a question, to please fill out one of the forms directed at one of the particular candidates that are outside. And we will be reconvening in 20 minutes. Thank you so much. We're going to be getting started pretty soon. If everyone could grab their seats. And people up at the mic, are we sitting and ready to be answering questions? We're going to start from the mic. Is there somebody ready with a question at the mic right away? Is that line up at the mic? Hello. Hello. Are you sitting at the mic? Are you ready to ask your question? Go ahead. Who's up at the mic? Your name and who you're asking the question to, please.
Hi, I'm Shelley Gerson. I'm an advocate for the LGBTQ community. My question is for Mark Strahl. Chilliwack has been on the national news for voting against a rainbow crosswalk that represents inclusion and diversity in our community. And I want to know, do you support a rainbow crosswalk in our community?
Thank you. So I think that question, I think there are a number of rainbow crosswalks in our community that we've seen spring up, certainly on Squiala, the school board, and at UFV. I don't have a problem with that. But I also don't have a problem with the city of Chilliwack, who's the responsible authority, taking the decision that they did. I think that it is a municipal decision, and they have done the consultation. They have made their decision. So I believe as a federal member of parliament, it's my job to work with local governments and to respect their jurisdiction. So I respect the jurisdiction of the city of Chilliwack to make this decision.
Thank you so much. I'm going to redirect that to candidate McQuillan. If you could answer the same question.
Yes, we definitely support it. I think inclusion and diversity is incredibly important, and it's not about the paint on the sidewalk. That's about making a public declaration of inclusion. And so while I agree it is a municipal decision, it's something that we would really encourage.
Thank you so much. The next question is going to be for candidate Green. Please, if elected, are you willing to insist that deferred prosecution process is eliminated so that large corporations cannot escape criminal prosecution?
Absolutely. If you look at the latest Liberal scandal with SNC-Lavalin, Justin Trudeau's excuse for it was that he's protecting jobs. Like SNC-Lavalin is the only construction company in Canada. Like, if a construction company breaks the law, then they should be held accountable to the full slate of the law. There's lots of other construction companies, especially out west, and we always get shortchanged in the west, that could take over those construction contracts that SNC-Lavalin would have lost if they had been prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Thank you.
Very much. Next up at the mic, do we have a question at the microphone? Do we have, last minute, yellow card, so microphone question will wait 1 moment. Candidate O'Donnell.
Yeah, I think that the example of Jody Wilson-Raybould, the stand she took, and the public support that she has gathered is a positive step forward in Canadian politics. The legislation that's at issue was actually brought in for SNC-Lavalin. They are the ones that lobbied for it, got it, snuck in the door, and then expected Justin Trudeau to fall in line. And if he hadn't been called out by Jody Wilson-Raybould, that would have gone through. And I'd also like to say to the local Liberal supporters that the stand that Louis de Jager took in defending Jody Wilson-Raybould and resigning from the local Liberal Party was also an example of the kind of initiative that is required.
Thank you for that. Back to the microphone for that question.
This is a question for candidate Arthur Green.
And your name.
Huh?
Your name.
Oh, my name is Nolan England. In the event, now please humor me because I don't know if any parties believe they would get this result besides maybe the PEC. That in the event that one of your scientists found evidence contrary to your current stance on the climate crisis, would you silence, censor, or in any way obstruct such a finding, or would you admit such a finding existed?
Well, I hope that's true. I hope that I am totally wrong and that there is no climate crisis. But the reality is 97,000 scientists around the world from 190 nations have declared this a climate emergency. So if you can find 97,001 climate scientists that disagree, I'm all for it, and I hope you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Candidate Green, on that question. Seeing no yellow cards, we're going to move to a question for Candidate Valonis. What is your party's plan to eliminate the $700 billion federal debt on which we're paying $32 billion per year in compound interest to private banks? So what's your party's plan to eliminate the federal debt?
The Liberal plan is to continue to invest in our economy, because as we see, when we invest in our economy and we create jobs, then we have taxpayers that are then lowering the percentage of our debt. So our plan isn't in the next 4 years to balance our budget, it's to increase our economy, continue to build, to continue to offer programs and services, and continue to grow a stronger Canada.
Thank you for that. Candidate Strahl, the yellow card, and then Candidate O'Donnell. Candidate Strahl first.
Yeah, I think there is, quite frankly, on this stage 4 years ago, the Liberal candidate was happy to repeat Justin Trudeau's promise to Canadians to balance the budget by 2019. He broke that promise and now won't even discuss balancing the budget in the short, medium, or long term. That was something when he was asked again, is that set in stone? A year later, he said, absolutely. And he said in the debates last time, I'm looking Canadians in the eye and I'm being truthful with them as I always have. We will balance the budget in 2019. That is a broken promise, and what that means, we now see them $20 billion deficits, so broke it by $20 billion, and their current platform adds another $60 billion on top of their current deficit plan. That has to be paid back. That has to be paid back by future generations. And yes, conservative governments went into deficit in the past when they were demanded to do so by the opposition during a worldwide economic meltdown. We came out of that quicker than anybody else. We balanced the budget before turning over power in 2015.
Thanks for that, Candidate Strahl. Next is Candidate O'Donnell. Go ahead.
As usual, there's talk about the deficit up and down, but the debt doesn't get talked about. The SNC-Lavalin scandal has scratched the surface on the levels of corruption that exist at the highest echelons of the society and has for many years. We say that there should be a commission of inquiry into where that debt came from, who profited from that debt, and who is manipulating and profiting from it today. When that commission of inquiry takes place, its first decision should be to make a moratorium on debt payments until we figure out which of those debts are legitimate and which of them are scams.
Thanks very much. Candidate Bogdanovic, please go ahead.
So,
Oh, sorry, no. Yeah, that was the yellow card, was Candidate Bogdanovic, please.
Okay.
First. I didn't see a card from Candidate McQuillan. Sorry.
It's coming.
He didn't grab that. I have Candidate Bogdanovic, and then Candidate Green, and then Candidate McQuillan. Everyone's weighing in on this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, and this is a very important issue. We're dealing with deficits, and we seem to be now in a stage of perpetual deficits. $20 billion with a supposed good economy is just inexcusable. And of course, so much of our debt-solving problems in the past have been about pushing it down to the provinces and onto the households. We need to rethink how we do things, and we actually do have to learn how to live within our means. The Liberals promised to balance it in 4 years. The Conservatives have promised to balance it in 5. I guess it's a question of whether you trust them. I look at it and I say it's immoral to run these deficits because we're taxing our future. We're basically imposing a tax on future generations, and we don't know what they're going to be facing. According to a lot of the individuals up here, they're going to be facing a lot of significant climate change. It would be nice if they had the financial resources to actually take those issues on.
Thank you very much. Next is candidate Green on the same topic, federal debt.
Well, I find it a little bit rich for Mark Stroll to be whining about deficits when the Conservative governments of the past are responsible for 75% of all the debt in Canadian history. As well, Andrew Scheer has stated publicly that he plans to run deficits for the next 4 years if he's elected into government. So, hello pot, meet kettle.
And candidate McQuillan on this topic about federal debt.
Thank you. I would really question both candidates from the Conservative and Liberal parties as well about their willingness to meet with lobbyists that have benefited from government subsidies and government payouts. We watch time and time again as corporations are given subsidies. We bought a pipeline when we acknowledge that there's a climate crisis. And what it really comes down to is that we've seen what those two governments do. They do the exact same thing. The Liberals met with oil lobbyists almost every day that they were in power. And we have to stop believing the excuse that there just isn't enough money to take care of the services we need and to take care of Canadians. We need to stop believing that it's okay to spend $4 billion on a pipeline so that we can save money and reinvest in green projects. That doesn't make sense. That's just delaying fixing the real problem. And so, again, I just ask that you really take into consideration what you've seen, the actions you've seen from these two parties, and vote with just a little bit of confidence that your vote can make a difference.
Thank you. And last, we have the candidate Valonis on it's the same topic, and you didn't speak on it right yet. Go ahead.
It makes absolute sense to me that we have to move our goods to where they need to go. And the safest way to move our goods is through a pipeline. It's not through rail. We invested in a pipeline because we have to invest in our economy and in jobs. And all the money that comes from that pipeline, we absolutely are reinvesting into greener forms of energy. It is unrealistic to think that we could completely shut down a pipeline. Our economy would take a complete tailspin. So we have to make sure that we are getting our goods to market the safest way possible and making sure that we are phasing out the use of this and working towards greener sources of energy while creating jobs in that sector and while making sure that we don't leave people behind that are currently working in that sector. So yes, we have invested in a pipeline, but we have a plan with that pipeline to invest in our future and to invest in our environment with that.
Thank you very much. The next, we're taking a question that came off Twitter, and it's directed toward candidate Strahl. It's, like many federal employees, I'm frustrated with the Phoenix nightmare the Conservative government created under Harper's leadership. People have lost homes, incurred debts, and lived with stress. If re-elected, what will you do to fix this?
Well, thank you for the question, and I have certainly met with and worked with affected employees from the Phoenix system. I would, quite frankly, disagree with the premise of the question. However, yes, we did have a review of the spending or the payroll systems in the federal government that was being tested when the Liberals won government in 2015. It was the Liberal government that decided, even though the initial test runs of the payroll system came back with troubling incidences of missed payments, etc., they were the ones that pressed the go button. And they are the ones that have had 4 years to try to fix the problem.
Oh, we'll refrain from that. Oh, that's really impolite. No, 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 we won't be doing that. We won't be doing that at all. Candidate Strahl, please continue.
Well, as I said, it was the Liberal government that pressed the go button, but for employees...
Oh, do we have security? Well, there's no room for that at this, there's no room for debating the candidate on the question. If another outburst like that, and you're going to have to leave. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Are you finished yours yet?
Well, I would say again, the timeline is clear that absolutely there are I'll just defer to the next question if we can't get the audience under control.
Yeah, we have to. No, we cannot have that. So please, it's really disrespectful. Yes, it is. Okay, so I'm going to have to ask for order at the meeting. And please, Candidate Green, do you want to take that on at this point?
Yes, thank you. It absolutely was Stephen Harper that started the Phoenix payroll program. It was Stephen Harper that spent $300 million developing a payroll program that a team of bookkeepers could have done far better. Today, they've spent another, $300 to $600 million trying to fix the damn payroll, and they still haven't done it. I know my wife works with gets paid with the Phoenix payroll system. There's people that I know who can't even make their mortgage payments because they can't get paid through the Phoenix payroll system. Do you think they would start all over again and change the damn system? No, they don't. They just keep pumping more hundreds of millions of dollars into this lemon. It's an absolute disgusting situation, and it should be changed. They should rip it up and start all over again. This is absolutely ridiculous, and it's the Conservatives that brought that payroll system in, and they should be taking full responsibility for it, and the Liberal government is no better off because they just keep playing kitty by the door with the same damn system. So I certainly agree with the gentleman, and I understand his frustration. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Oh, but Candidate Strahl, you've already been in on this one. Did you want to finish?
Well, I guess I'd like an opportunity to answer it once, but I'll use a card if I need to.
No, not for the same question,
Yep.
because you launched it, so we'll...
Yeah, well, I'll use a card then. Ms. Balonis did it for the last question.
You won't need a card.
Okay.
It's being redirected
Okay.
back to you.
Okay. I would simply say that the Auditor General of Canada, who is not a Liberal and is not a Conservative, said that there was blame to be had by both the Conservatives and by both the Liberal governments. I do not dispute that. The program has been a fiasco. The changes that were made did not benefit Canadian workers, and they didn't save the government any money. So it's an example of well-intentioned, poorly delivered policy, absolutely. But the government of the day does not get off unscathed, and that's what I'm trying to say. There is blame to go around for both the Conservatives and the Liberals. That is what the independent Auditor General of Canada had to say, and I'm sorry if people don't want to hear that, but that is the reality. I will continue to work with affected workers, fight for them so that they get the money that they're owed.
No, thank you very much for that. Next question's coming from the mic. Please take the mic.
Good evening. Hello.
If you could state your name and who it's addressed to.
Hello, yes. My question is directed to Kelly Valonis. Your party...
And you are?
Sorry. My name's Alex. Your party claims to be pro-environment, but yet it's spending $4 billion on a pipeline, campaigning with 2 jets, and etc. Claims to be about respect towards all cultures, but on many occasions can be seen appropriating and often in an offensive garb. He claims to be about investing in Canada, but is spending willy-nilly elsewhere. He claims to be to be about protecting free speech, but yet stifles his own. How can you support a man who lacks basic decency and integrity, and why should we?
Alex, thank you for that question. I do disagree with you on some of those points, absolutely. I support a Liberal Party whose platform I believe in and who I've seen over the past 4 years has invested into this economy. I support a party and a leader who believes in equality for all. I support a leader and a party who is making sure that our economy will grow, that's investing in the people, that has reduced the poverty level, that has reduced our unemployment rate, that has created new jobs, that has invested in housing, that has invested in medical care. So I think that you and I disagree a little bit about that. I can't speak to some of the things that you said because I'm not Justin Trudeau, so I'm not going to sit up here and say why he chose to have a brown face or a black face. I think he apologized wholeheartedly for that. I think that issue is over, and that's my feelings on that. Thank you so much for your question.
Thanks very much. Next question is for candidate McQuillan. How does your party plan to help seniors who are struggling with poverty?
First and foremost, we will be protecting pensions. That's incredibly important to us. We will be expanding access to health care. Of course, we're implementing pharmacare. I know just in being a support system for my mother, that was a huge shock to us, was how much really medications can cost. And that was a big part of what I feel we're missing. Seniors should be able to age with dignity. My mom was a nurse. She spent her whole life taking care of others, and now in her senior years, she's not able to have really the same support systems. And we're also going to be implementing dental care, which is incredibly important, and really just expanding access to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no yellows on that one, move back to the mic for one. Gentleman's going to ask a question. Go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Ken Pauley, and my question is directed to Mark Strahl. I want to know what plans the Conservatives have for a society that is rapidly becoming digitized and roboticized. What will happen to the workers who are displaced?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that certainly as the world changes and we've seen over generations that automation has become a key part of manufacturing, and I don't think that we can stop that progress. I don't think the government should particularly. I've heard some other parties talking about taxing robots that replace workers. I think that is quite frankly a short-sighted policy that's fiscally irresponsible. I think we have a responsibility when there are changes in the economy to try to place workers in available jobs, and if they require retraining, the governments can invest in retraining them for available jobs. So I don't think we can stop progress. I think we have to help people adjust to it in the best way possible, in a seamless way as possible, through retraining programs as necessary.
And could we just redress the same question back to candidate McQuillan?
I know we are in an incredible transition time, and part of that is really wonderful, and part of that is pretty scary for your average Canadian. We do plan on creating 300,000 new clean energy jobs and retraining for that, but more importantly, as we see these transitions, it's incredibly important for a government to acknowledge that some people are going to need supports as we transition. We've seen that already. So in implementing those support systems like pharmacare, dentacare, protecting pensions as we transition, and just making sure that we have structures for things like childcare. We have a wonderful program where we're offering a $5,000 subsidy for people who are facing homelessness or are struggling to pay for homes. And those programs are going to be vital as we change, because we really, as much as we'd like to say we can stop that change and that evolution, we're always changing. And I don't think we can stop it, but I think it's vital that we put systems in place to make sure people don't fall through the cracks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're trying to count the amount of time that each of the candidates are getting. We're trying to even it out, and some of the questions that have come in are heavier toward one candidate rather than the other. So I'm going to go to the mic next, but I'm going to ask for a question that's not for candidate Strahl. Of course, if there's topics that they want to jump in on, they can use their yellow cards to do that. Is there anyone at the mic that has a question? Go ahead.
My name is Hannah England, and I have a question for Dorothy O'Donnell. If you're elected, how does your party plan to thoroughly and comprehensively address the homeless crisis, mental health issues, and addictions? Would you address it on a local or national level?
I don't expect to be elected. A vast social change needs to take place before the prospects for the Marxist-Leninists to get elected will improve. And that social change is really people empowering themselves. And that empowerment can take place now. It's not something that might happen in the future. So the people concerned need to organize, militate, make their demands as far as they have done in various communities around BC, including going to court, including to get some recognition that having a home is a right. As far as policy goes, there needs to be massive investment in social programs in general, housing in particular, and in the whole infrastructure required to have people who have mental health issues, addictions, and other complex problems have the support they need when they need it.
Thanks very much, Candidate O'Donnell. On homelessness and addictions, seeing no yellow cards on that one, we're going to move to... Oh, there is one. Didn't see it high in the air. Now I see it, we got it. Next will be Candidate Malonis answering that same question.
Homelessness, crime, and drug addiction affects every person. It doesn't just affect the homeless, and it doesn't just affect the people that the crimes are committed against, and it certainly just doesn't affect our addicts. So we need to make sure that, first and foremost, that we rehumanize the way that we look at these issues. I agree, they are a social issue. Homelessness, drug addiction, it's not a criminal activity. So we need to continue to work, because the City of Chilliwack has done and made some great strides so far, but as an MP, it is our role, my role, to work with the municipal, with the provincial government, to make sure that we are providing the services that are needed, and the money is going into programs for the programs that are needed, for detox programs, for safe injection sites, for homeless hubs. We need to make sure that our community feels safe. We're not just talking about putting our dollars into the homeless, we're putting our dollars into the whole community so that people that live here feel safe, and that we're creating a place that we're all proud to live in.
Yellow card from Candidate McQuillan.
So homelessness is a huge issue, and we see it increasing. And I think what we've seen from our last governments is really enabling corporations to suppress wages, where we've just seen corporations really dominate in terms of lobbying the government, in terms of getting bailouts. Corporations don't need bailouts. They need to pay their taxes just like the rest of us. And, when
When there is incredible inequality, there's hopelessness. And when there's hopelessness, we see things like addictions and mental health issues. Those are results of trauma. Those are not, just luck or poor choices. Those are results of not having the supports in place early enough to tackle this. We need to make sure that people can afford their medications if they're having mental health issues that require medication. We need to make sure that people have supports so that they can afford their housing. We need to make sure that housing prices aren't soaring while wages are staying low. And those are things that need to be addressed at a federal level. It's just stunning that corporations have been able to do this.
Thanks so much. And candidate Strahl, weighing in on the homelessness.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
I think to answer your question, I think that the solutions to homelessness, poverty, mental illness are always best when they come from the local community. Trying to come up with solutions from Ottawa, which is 3,000 kilometers away, if I recall, it doesn't work as well as local solutions. And I think that's what the City of Chilliwack, both its people and its government, is doing well. We have a housing task team which is working with all levels of government, all local service providers to ensure that we are getting the best practices and implementing those for the people that need them. We've seen the people of Chilliwack step up through the Bowls of Hope program, Ruth and Naomi's, Cyrus Center, Salvation Army. These are local community initiatives that are being implemented to address a local problem. And yes, the federal government has a role to play in supporting that, but they shouldn't try to lead it. That leadership should come from the community. We shouldn't be telling communities they have to have safe injection sites. We should be letting communities decide how they want to deal with things like addiction. And that's our leader has put forward a plan to put treatment, detox, recovery at the heart of dealing with drug addiction. And I think that's the sort of thing at a community level that can make a real difference.
Thank you so much for tackling that topic that everybody wants to see addressed and talked about. Next, we're going to ask a question of candidate Green. And the question reads, all my adult life, I've heard party after party, leader after leader, claim we will hold the rich accountable to pay their fair share and improve incomes and lives of the poor and middle class. But the gap is still ever widening from the rich and the rest. Do you think any party can really succeed at this? And if so, how and when?
Well, yes, I think we can, and I think we do have a plan. First of all, the first thing we would do is we would raise the taxes of transnational corporations back to their 1990 levels and make them equal with that of the United States. That would raise quite a few billions of dollars. We would also offer a guaranteed livable income for the bottom of our society, the lower income earners, to bring them back up to a level of income that is actually livable. You know, because of automation, we've left so many people behind. Like, for example, there's 400 homeless people in Chilliwack, which seems to be okay with the Conservatives, but it's not okay with us. And we need to bring these people back up to a level that, where they can help themselves. I mean, how do you apply for a job, or how do you prepare for income if you're living in a gutter or in the back alley? So there's lots of things that governments can do. Equality is a big part of that. We would also leave the income tax rates for small business and personal taxes at the rates they are now, so that we wouldn't cause any more discomfort for our constituents. But there's lots that we can do, and to throw our hands into the air and give up and say, oh, well, we have to leave it to the municipalities or the local governments, because, you know what, we've shortchanged them on transfer payments as well. So.
Thank you very much. Candidate O'Donnell, go ahead. Oh, sorry, O'Donnell.
Our party doesn't believe that parties should come to power. We say that people should come to power. People should have the initiative in their hands. And right down at the constituency level, there should be an ongoing discussion and debate within the constituency to work out the program for the constituency. And in the course of that discussion and debate, someone comes forward who's a champion of that program, the community adopts the program and gives a mandate to that candidate. So people may belong to this or that political party, but frankly, it's irrelevant. The parties should not have the control over the nomination process. That's a big change that we recommend. As far as what's actually going on, I think this committee should send a copy of one of these to the National Commission that organized the National Leaders Debate. This they present it as if to have open discussion, there's no choice but to have people jump on top of each other and insult each other and debase one another, when this simple mechanism allows everyone to speak their mind.
Thank you very much for that. Next up from the mic, please. And again, I'm sorry, we have to have a question directed at the candidates other than candidate Strahl at this point.
Okay, then I'll pass.
Oh, I need a question. Yeah, just because it's the time, we have to even it out. The candidate will likely, has the option to yellow card it.
That guy got to yell, so can I yell just for a quick sec? My question's for Mark Strahl, and it is, my name is Daniel, and I'm very pro-life, and I have a question about abortion. I have adopted 2 local street kids, personally, with my family, and I just want to know, are you maintaining the status quo for the Conservative Party and following Andrew Scheer in the unwillingness to bring up the abortion debate federally, in addition to federally funding abortions overseas?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take that question. As I said, I needed a question from another candidate. It has to do with, to be fair with all the timing, I asked for it not to be directed at candidate Strahl. And we've also addressed that issue as well. I needed.
Yeah, it was.
It was. We have had it. We have tackled that topic. Yeah, I believe so. Candidate Strahl, didn't you address it already? Can you even? Don't you feel like you've addressed that question?
I can address it if, like, you're running the show, Jennifer, so I answer as I'm allowed.
My sense was that it was answered and addressed at this point, so I'm.
If you want the question to stand, I'm happy to answer.
Well, I'll take it one more time.
Okay.
The topic that I really feel we have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I am personally pro-life, but I respect the decision of my leader, Andrew Scheer, to say that a Conservative government would not reopen this issue. That is the policy that existed under Stephen Harper, and it is the policy that exists under, it will exist under Andrew Scheer. But unlike the other major parties, we believe that members of Parliament are able to vote their conscience on matters like that. So we don't disallow candidates, for instance, for running for office if they don't hold certain views. And we certainly don't disallow camps like Camp Kakwa and Hope from getting government money if they don't agree with Justin Trudeau on this issue. So we continue to believe that there are many Canadians that hold differing views on this, but that a Conservative government will not reopen the debate.
Thank you very much. No one else yellow carding that. We'll move on to question 4, candidate Bogdanovic. Here we go. I have a growing young family and can't afford to live in this town anymore. What's your plan to deal with the affordability of housing in Chilliwack?
Yeah, on the issue of affordability of housing, we have to understand that a lot of this is being driven by what's going on in Vancouver. We're a hinterland of Vancouver. And whenever there's a housing crisis in a place like Vancouver, it pushes all of the issues out to the hinterland regions, and we're seeing that more and more our property values are going up. And what's driving that is actually immigration. The other parties are all trying to solve this issue by increasing the supply of houses, and that certainly has to be part of the solution, but we also have to bring down the demand, and what's driving the demand is immigration. 40% of the immigrants coming to this country are going to Toronto and Vancouver. They are the most expensive cities in, Canada, and that's not accidental. Right now, Vancouver is the second most expensive city in the world to live, and it's because we have the highest rate of immigration of any Western nation out there. And so that's per capita. And so when I look at this, I say we need to bring in a reform on immigration to bring some control to this housing issue. You can't do it just by supply. We also have to look at it on the issue of demand. Beyond that, I think we need to empower communities to look at these issues and have the resources. I agreed with what Mark Sawyer said earlier. It's got to come up from the community. But where I think I disagree is I think that the community should control the taxes themselves so they don't have to rely on the federal government deciding that Chilliwack or Hope are worthy of, the finances.
Thanks for that. Yellow card from candidate Valonis. Appreciate that. And then McQuillan. Go ahead.
Am I first?
Yes, you are.
Sorry, I didn't
Candidate
hear that.
Valonis.
Actually, 2,400 Canadian businesses and jobs have been grown and created from immigration. So it's interesting. I was in Hope on Saturday, and I spoke to a doctor who immigrated here from Iraq. And he was so proud that he's going to actually get to vote in this election. This will be his first time as a Canadian citizen. Him and his family live here in Chilliwack, and he is now bringing an essential service, which we have a shortage of. He's a doctor, and he invested $60,000 into Canada in order for him to do the testing, that he already was a doctor in Iraq, but to make sure that he could be a doctor here. So he hasn't drained our economy in any way. He's invested in us. Immigration brings diversity, it creates jobs, and it's one of the reasons I'm proud to be a Canadian.
Thank you. Candidate McQuillan.
So I've got a little bit of a background in real estate, and I've seen thousands and thousands of properties and transactions go across my desk. So I can tell you that, unfortunately, candidate Bogdanovic, I'm going to try and pronounce this properly, is just really misleading you on this. It is not an immigration problem. Most immigrants are coming here and building families just like you and I. There is definitely a problem with, there's a problem with fraudulent transactions, and that often hangs under the mask of being an immigration problem. That is not the biggest issue. We have an issue where companies have been able to suppress wages while they've been able to lift the cost of living. And that's the real problem. It's not an immigration problem. That's such a small piece of the puzzle. So what we intend to do is make sure that cost of living is reflected in housing prices. And it's much more complex than just using that end. There are people who own homes that don't want to see a bubble burst. And we have a really solid plan to make sure that that's covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yellow card from candidate Strahl on the housing affordability.
Right. I think, quite frankly, the immigration straw man is just that. The number 150,000 that Maxime Bernier has come up with is just pulled out of thin air. It's not based on any data. It's not based on any evidence. It's just based on wanting to signal to people that there should be less immigrants coming to Canada. And I think, quite frankly, we shouldn't have people. We shouldn't have that. People saying there should be more, or that there should be less. That those decisions should be made on the evidence. What does the labor market need? What is our family reunification needs? How do we keep this economy going so that those numbers are not subject to political football? On the issue of housing affordability, I think there are certainly things that we can do. We've talked about fixing the liberal stress test, which artificially keeps first-time home buyers in Chilliwack out of the market. We've talked about launching an inquiry into money laundering, which is a real issue that has driven up the price of homes across the country. We want to increase amortization periods to 30 years as they were previously, to lower payments, and we want to make surplus federal property available so that there can be more development like was done at Garrison Crossing. I think those are responsible measures that we can take to increase home affordability.
Thanks very much. Candidate McQuillan wanted to get back in there.
Yes. Just in terms of increasing stress tests or increasing ability to get multiple loans, that's not what Canadians need. It won't solve the problem of affordability if we just open up the gates to more loans. Those loans are still going to take up the same percentage of wages. It can't just be addressed from more loans or an easier stress test. Those stress tests exist because they're taking into account what people are making and what people are paying for housing. That number doesn't change just because it's easier to get a loan. Canadians don't need more loans. They need a real solution for this.
Thanks very much. And then candidate Bogdanovic.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how so many of the candidates up here don't seem to understand supply and demand economics. It's pretty straightforward. If you have the demand that's going up, right, and you can't match the supply, you've got a problem. And right now in this country, we can make maybe about 37,000 houses, unless we're planning on doing modular units for all of them. We have about 37,000 capacity for building. The construction crew cannot just keep pushing it out under the current regulations. So unless they're planning on really overhauling how construction is done, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Ultimately, we have to be aware that we can bring in the economic migrants, we can bring them in quickly, we can bring them in efficiently, but what we have to do is bring the number down, because it spiraled out of control in the 1990s, later part of the 1990s. In the early part of the 1990s, we had the numbers of immigrants like what we are proposing in the PPC. When we started going above 250,000, the housing market hit into high gear. In the urban cores, Vancouver and Toronto, and I don't think that's accidental, I think that's because 40% of immigrants are going to those areas.
Thank you very much. I think we've exhausted that topic. Next question will be for candidate Green. What's your plan to deal with the congestion on Highway 1 between Chilliwack-Hope and the Lower Mainland?
Well, you know what? I commuted between Hope and Vancouver for like 30 years. I used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning so I could beat the rush hour traffic into town. And if I couldn't get out of town by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I just stayed there. But I don't think expanding the freeway system is the answer for moving people. I think what we have to do is we have to expand our rail lines. We have to, you know what, Canada doesn't even have a bus system that is equal to Mexico's. So, I mean, we need public transportation. We need ways to move people, and we can't be all jumping in our car, especially with our climate crisis the way it's happening. We need to move mass amounts of people in public transportation systems. We have 2 rail lines, but we don't own them anymore. We sold them to transnational corporations in the United States. So we have no control over our rail lines anymore. But we have to get those back. Somewhere along the line, we're going to have to write a check, and we're going to have to increase our transportation system so it encompasses for everybody that lives in the Lower Mainland to be able to move around and be able to transport ourselves to and fro. I mean, I can't even get a bus from Hope to Chilliwack, for darn sakes. I mean, you know, we're just going about it totally the wrong way, and we need to get out of the box and start thinking about look at Europe, how they move people. You can take a train anywhere in Europe. I know they started hundreds of years ago, but still, just the same, there's an example that we can follow. We need to change our system.
Thanks very much. Candidate O'Donnell's going to weigh in.
I'm here to say you can take a bus from Hope to Chilliwack, and I encourage people here to do that. Take a day, take a bus up to Hope, go to the Othello tunnels, enjoy the town of Hope, and come back on public transit. It does exist. The other thing that exists is the various activist groups who have been campaigning for light rail transit, for the interurban, and for tourist-based historical use of the interurban rail lands. This is an example of the kind of activism that we support.
Thanks very much for that important question on congestion. I know a lot of us are interested in those answers. Next, we're going to see if there's anyone at the mic for a question for a candidate other than Strahl at this point. We still have to go ahead.
Hi, I'm Stephen Brown, and my question is directed towards Mr. Bogdanovic. As an MP, how would you regulate gun ownership? Under the current Liberal government, Trudeau has implemented laws and policies that make gun ownership for the average law-abiding citizen, almost impossible. So what is the PPC's stance on gun ownership, and how can you provide and regulate that safety for our citizens? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the recent incarnations of gun law in Canada have been over the top, and right now we've got a Liberal government that seems to want to go and basically engage in gun seizures. Based on whether or not they think the gun looks scary, they will basically allow one gun to be in the hands of Canadians, another gun not to be, based on whether it's a scary-looking gun, even if they have the exact same capacity or the one gun that's being allowed is more powerful. And it basically demonstrates that they really don't know what they're doing. I think that what we're looking at is when you are dealing with this, we license the gun owner. And the gun owners go through an extensive background check before they receive the license. They preclude a whole lot of mental illnesses that are known to be connected to violence. And everyone who is on, basically has that license, gets a background check every 24 hours. Now, I don't know how many of you actually have had to have a criminal background check in the last 24 hours, but if you had, it's probably because you own a gun. And so we already have a really good system in place. I think that we need to be allowed to let the hunters, we need to allow to let the sportsmen continue to be able to use their guns without this draconian overreach. Canada does gun laws well. We should not be trying to take away the individual's rights to engage in this.
A yellow card from candidate Strahl on the topic of gun ownership.
I certainly think that the Liberal approach to this has been lazy, quite frankly, to go after the most vetted and the most vetted law-abiding Canadians and say if we take things away from them or if we crack down on them and make them follow more laws and jump through more hoops, that somehow we're going to solve the gun violence problem. That is missing the target completely. We should be targeting illegal guns that are coming in through the United States. We should be targeting people who use guns in the commission of a crime. We should not be targeting hunters, sports shooters, target shooters. If you go up to the Chilliwack Rod and Gun Club, which I'd encourage all candidates to do, these are not, most of them aren't even hunters. They shoot steel, they shoot paper targets, they do it as a hobby, they are safe, they are white-collar professionals, these are not dangerous people, and pretending that you are dealing with gun crime by going after law-abiding gun owners is simply irresponsible. It doesn't work. We need to go after smuggled guns and gun criminals and the gangs who are using these in our major cities.
Thanks very much.
Do I get my card back like Mark did? Do I get to have my yellow card back there like Mark did? Just curious, because I really wanted to answer that question, and I was too eager to use all of my cards.
Well, we were going to redirect the question at this point to you anyway, so we're going to allow you to answer that one.
Oh, thank you. Mark, actually, I belong to the gun club in Agassiz. I am a responsible gun owner. The Liberal government is not trying to remove guns from responsible gun owners. My husband's a hunter. What we are trying to do is take crime off the streets and keep the guns out of the hands of criminals and youngsters that are killing one another. And I don't know a responsible gun owner or a hunter that really feels the need to have a semi-automatic weapon. So I differ with you on that, and I'm proud to be a gun owner.
Thank you very much for that. Next question is for candidate O'Donnell. What's your plan to make life more affordable in Canada?
People have to make those plans themselves. People need to organize, activate themselves to make their claim on society, to fight for the rights that belong to them as human beings, to defend themselves and to defend the rights of all. Affordability is a function of a situation in which the people are, relatively speaking, powerless, and the corporations rule the roost. We need to change that, and you can change your attitude to overcome hopelessness, helplessness, and humiliation by standing up for your rights. So if you're tenants, there's the possibility of organizing tenants' unions. If you are homeowners, there's the possibility of fighting for your rights against these mortgage companies that take advantage of people. So basically, you have to defend yourself to get affordability.
Thank you very much for that. And a question from the mic. Do we have a fresh question?
Yes, good evening. Frank, a question for Kelly Velnas. Would a re-elected Liberal government maintain the current procurement processes for military hardware or look to change it and modernize it because it is slow and cumbersome?
So it's the procurement process that you're asking about?
Yes, the procurement processes for upgrading and maintaining military hardware. Would you look to keep it at its present standards, which are currently very slow and cumbersome and results in old military equipment and outdated by the time it's approved, or would you look to modernize it and make it more streamlined?
Thank you for that question. Absolutely, if this is the voice of the people that are in this business and knowing that, then I guess it's time that we start looking at that and modernizing it. That's not something, I'll be honest with you, that I'm overly familiar with, but it's absolutely something that I would ask the questions and work with the right people to get the right answers and to move forward if that's what's needed. Thank you.
This is for candidate Green. If elected MP, would you stand up and represent the majority of your constituents, even if it is the opposite of what your leader wants?
Well, thank you for that question. Elizabeth May when I talked to Elizabeth May, I referred to her as boss, and she said to me, "Arthur, I'm not your boss. Your constituents are your boss. And your main concern is to serve your constituents. And if your constituents, if the majority of them want to go against the policy of the Green Party, then you stand up for them because they're the people that elected you." So absolutely, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And moving to the mic.
Good evening. My name is Smiley Kanangara, and my question is for Mark Strahl. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Mark, you've been our MP for such a long time, so I hope you'll be able to answer this question clearly. Your party does not, the climate action and the environment has not been a priority for the Conservative Party, but looking beyond your party's platform, What is your environmental or social dream?
Well, I would thank you for the question. I disagree with you. We have put forward a real plan for the environment. It's the most comprehensive plan ever put forward on the environment by an opposition party. 60 pages, over 50 concrete recommendations that would make an improvement in our environment. We've talked about investing in Canadian technology, not carbon taxes. We believe in protecting our air, land, and water through concrete, real actions that actually make a difference in the lives of Canadians. And most importantly, we want to encourage the use of Canadian products and Canadian technology. For instance, Canadian LNG, liquefied natural gas, displacing Chinese coal would be good for the global environment. It would be good for the Canadian economy. Carbon capture and storage put on Chinese coal plants would reduce emissions. It would be good for Canadians. Those are the sorts of things, if we believe that this is a global problem, we should be looking at implementing taking our environmental excellence, exporting it around the world so that we can make a difference in global emissions. And our plan is the most comprehensive, as I said, most comprehensive plan ever released by an opposition party. It is a real plan, and it will achieve better results than the current plan from the current government.
Thank you so much. That is actually all the time we have for all the questions tonight. That turned out to be the last question. Thank you so much for being here and for listening and for taking the time to listen to the candidates and make your decision. Thank you so much.